Welcome everybody to another edition of Behind the Curtain. I'm Dr. Kevin Marryshow. I'm a chiropractor. Been practicing for about 12 years now at MyoDetox. Just to give you a little bit of background of MyoDetox, we're a team of physical therapists, chiropractors, and massage therapists. We have clinics across Toronto, Vancouver, Calgary, and Los Angeles. And our big mission is to make movement health a daily habit across the globe, and conversations like this help us get closer to that. So I want to introduce my two panelists. We have Zahra Bruce. Zahra's been in practice for 25 years now, 8 years with the Toronto Raptors. Melissa Doldron, practiced for 11 years. First tour of duty, if you want to call it that, with the Raptors, about to go into second year. So, Jay, where are you at, Jay? Raise your hand. There you go. So this gentleman is the regional director of our team in Toronto, and Jay had this idea for Behind the Curtain when we hosted this the last time, that there's incredible stories behind the curtain, so to say, in pro sports, and pulling the veil on it and really having these in-depth conversations to learn more about what happens behind the scenes. So much of us in this space we're just inspired, and we have aspirations of working with pro athletes one day, and just want to learn more about what does it take to get there, and when you're there, what is it like? And that's a lot of what this conversation is like. So we'd love to dive right into it. I think we got like 45 minutes, and I know we got a lot to talk about. So Zahra, if you don't mind kicking us off, we'd just love to start off just learning more about your journey. 25 years, 8 years with the Raptors. Let me get my math right. So like 17 years-ish in private practice before you started working with the Raptors. What was that journey like from day one all the way to just getting into the position that you are now?
Everyone can hear me okay? Yeah. So I started off doing my undergrad at Western in kin, and I always knew I wanted to do something in healthcare. And during that time, there was a bit of a transition from hospital-based to community-based care, and someone had mentioned the idea of complementary medicine. So I did a prep course for massage therapy, and I loved it. I loved what I was learning, the anatomy, the physiology, and then the fact that you can have a direct impact and positive effect on someone pretty immediately. So 25 years later, here I am, still practicing. My first few years as a massage therapist was dabbling in a little bit of everything, right? Motor vehicle accidents, wellness, a little bit of spa, but then within a couple of years, I transferred into a sport medicine clinic downtown, and that's where the passion and love of dealing with sport and sport injuries really kind of evolved. In terms of how I ended up with the Raptors, in that multidisciplinary sport medicine clinic, there was a lot of therapists who had connections in the sport world. At that point, around 2016, there were individual players that were looking for extra help in terms of recovery and rehab. And my boss at that time knew my current boss, and they referred me, and that's the journey. You start off a little bit with the individual players, and then, through your authentic treatment and the work that you do, it becomes noticed and acknowledged. And then it was more of okay, well, if you're working with these players, can you come in on a practice day? Can you come in on a recovery day? The players are benefiting. Can you come and travel with us? We're going to playoffs. And the next thing you know, you're part of a puzzle that helped the team win a championship, right? So it just evolved very, I would say, gracefully into that. That was my journey.
Melissa, what was your journey like?
Definitely a little different. Being an RMT is my second career, so I feel like when I made the transition out of what I was doing before, I felt like I had a little more sense of urgency maybe, but I also was coming from a bit of a sport background. I was training and competing at a very amateur level in boxing, and so it was sort of an idea that a neighbor who was an RMT, we'd been chatting, I'd been going through this sort of career crisis of I need a change, I don't know what that change will be, and she was the one originally who sort of dropped the seed of oh, you're already involved in this sport, I think you're really good with people, you're sort of coaching part-time. She's like, have you ever thought of doing massage? And at the time, I'd been receiving the benefits of it on the amateur athlete level. So that's sort of what piqued my interest. And I was like, okay, tell me more. What is, your career path like? What's going back to school look like? And so when I did decide to go back to school, it was sort of with that focus, initially about working with fighters and trying to, help people that I was training with. But it was always that idea of working with an athletic an active population. And so, I went back to school, graduated, and really just, I think I've just been fortunate throughout my career with that initial intentionality of like wanting to work in a specific area. Also just having people that I know help me along the way by either introducing me to other clinicians that they know, like pulling up opportunities if they hear about things. So it's just sort of, my every career step, every few years of working with different athletes from amateurs to pros has always kind of just been, through a lot of just networks and my community.
Yeah, when we sat down for dinner, we talked a lot about just showing up authentically and just how important building your network is. Like, there is no direct path to getting here. Obviously, you have two very different stories to get to this point. It's just always incredible hearing, like, because you always get the question of like, what advice do you have for somebody getting on this path? And it's just like your story is your story. So it's just really powerful to hear how different your paths were to get there. We'd love to talk about just the landscape of not only pro sports, but the medical team and the medical staff and how that's evolved over time. And there's a bunch of professions in here, physical therapists, chiropractors, but specifically when it comes to massage therapists, like, Zahra, how have you seen, I guess, the massage therapists on a medical team, like how has that evolved in terms of like whether it's recognition or involvement or just like growth, not only with the Raptors, but like across the NBA?
So massage therapy probably originally thought of as ancillary, right? An adjunct or ancillary to a smaller role to what a medical team would do. But that has definitely evolved in terms of now it is much more sophisticated, science-backed component of performance and well-being, for athletes and teams. It's basically a fixture. In a sporting environment or a sporting team, you will find massage therapists there. And my journey was part of that evolution, right? From players acknowledging that this is what they wanted and then voicing that to the team, and then the team realizing how important it is, with all the benefits of it. And then next thing you know, you're there in it with everybody. And we work definitely as a multidisciplinary integrated team. We are all part of meetings that impact players' wellness, treatment plans. It's important to have the feedback from all the different modalities and skill sets to really optimize on a player's health and well-being. So it has evolved greatly from an ancillary tool to a very much needed and valued skill set. Yeah. Thank you,
Zahra. And Melissa, on your end, would love to hear your take on the difference in athletes that you've worked with. I've got to see your journey, and I've watched you work with curlers to basketball players, obviously with the Raptors. You've spent some time with the Jays. What are the similarities or differences across those folks, whether it's their mindset or their bodies or how they think about it?
I think when you get to the highest level, even when you're thinking about professional sports, so with NBA and MLB, where it is really their full-time job, they think about it year-round, in-season, off-season, everything is about keeping their bodies in as good a shape and high-performing as possible and trying to mitigate their injuries and just optimize and maximize everything. I think when you see those athletes, they're very finely tuned, and so when you do the work, it's not like when you're in clinic, and as everyone who's a therapist knows, you might have to chase your client down to do the rehab exercises, and they come back in, and you're just like, okay, let's go back to getting through those beginning steps, because they just want the nice manual treatment, and these athletes are working out every day. They're thinking about their mobility, their flexibility, their strength, their nutrition is good. So like you're just seeing people at their peak as far as like how their body performs, despite all the demands that their sport entails. So I find when I worked with, I worked with curlers. Fun fact, I love curling. A lot of, at least in Canada, professional curlers often still have to have a part-time or full-time job, just based on how their season is. They only play on weekends usually, and so they're still kind of balancing a corporate life for the most part, or a consultant life, and then having to still be in the gym, do all the skills they need to perform, and then compete. So you're gonna see, even in that sport, it's very asymmetrical. They get in a deep lunge on the same side all the time, or or women who are sweeping, it's this motion where one shoulder's getting jacked up. So like seeing a curler versus seeing a basketball player is gonna be a different set of things you're always gonna be working on. You're trying to weed out those asymmetries. Like that's what they'd work on in the gym, is knowing that there's one side they're trying to stay as balanced as possible. But in the therapeutic aspect with manual therapy, you're just going to be working a lot on the areas that they're kind of end up overusing through their sport. And the same thing, grassroots, like I've had the fortune, the privilege really, to work the last 3 summers with Canada Baseball's women's national team. And these are girls who are like 17 to 25-ish in range. So a lot of them are students, whether high school, college students, same thing, working part-time. A lot of them are 2-sport athletes. They'll play hockey in the winter, baseball in the summer, but they're not professional athletes. So they're doing all the things that they need to do, but on their own. And so they don't necessarily have the full support of being able to get massage, physio, that type of stuff on a regular basis. So when you see them, they're probably a little more jacked up. They're definitely dealing with way more injuries that they're trying to just mitigate on their own. Same thing with like nutrition, especially if you're a university student. I'm sure a lot of us can remember, those can be lean times. So it's a lot of education, I find, when you're working with younger athletes or people who are more on a grassroots level in their sport. So I'll just say it's nice if you've worked many years in clinic and seeing sort of the type of gen pop of people who are stuck at a desk, they're weekend warriors, or they're, for a lot of us who work in Toronto, I'm sure a lot of us work with runners, long distance runners, and you sort of see how people will like abuse their bodies for that sport, because that's like that's their passion. It gets them away from their desk, but then they got to sit at a desk for 8 hours. You can see how that's gonna, what that does with your stiffness, your movement patterns. It's very different. So when you get the opportunity to see athletes at the high level, you just really appreciate, all the years you built up your quality like manual therapy skills on the general population.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I'll add to that actually. So in my clinical years, dealing with weekend warriors, the triathletes and the ultra runners, they have a different discipline, right? They don't necessarily, as Melissa alluded to, they don't necessarily have access to everything. But when they do carve out that time, they're very intentional with it. So they are very intentional with making sure that they get to their massage appointment, their physio appointment, and they have a different focus because they're literally multitasking. It's not just the sport that they're in. They're a lawyer or a banker and a parent, or there's so much that's going on, as opposed to just focusing on their profession, which is their sport. That adds another level of how they utilize the services that we provide. Yeah.
Right. Zahra, would you say, in private practice, when athletes or pro players, anybody who's working towards something, when they come to you, they clearly know why they're showing up, the value, what they want to get. But like working with the pro team, would you say there's a stark contrast in when players show up? Like, how much do they know about the value that we provide? Is it everybody generally has a sense of, you're a massage therapist, I want this, I know how important it is to me, or is there like a contrast?
Actually, I'm going to let Melissa answer that question, because we just had a conversation about this. Like, do they even know what we do? Right. They just see us?
I think I think it depends. I think some do and really understand that value. But I do think, when you have clients sort of outside in the general population, paying their money, if you have benefits, being like, okay, how am I gonna square this out for my 4 massages in this amount of time? I do sometimes feel like there's a little more value that you might feel from that. But I do think the athletes, they absolutely know how critical having all the manual therapy from, the athletic therapist to the physio to the massage, like how it all coincides, that we're all a specific circle of care. And so I do think they understand that it's not like that in the real world. Whether or not they appreciate it every day, we hope they do. We hope they do.
They do.
But I do think they kind of understand that, and not every team will provide, every team's medical support staff is going to look very different too, so I think we hear that. I think more than anything is players that come to us from other teams, we're always curious too, and so you'll just say, oh yeah, we had X amount of this, X amount of this, and you can sort of contrast and compare what that looks like, where they're like, oh, it was more here, less here, this service feels more elevated, etc.
Amazing. So Zahra, 25 years practice. At Mayo, one of our core values is never stop learning. And there's, in those 25 years, development, constantly getting betterment. And, would love to hear you unpack, were there moments, courses, mentors, like how did you develop clinically over those 25 years, if there's anything to share there?
So sport massage therapy was an emerging concept when I graduated, right? It wasn't as established as it is now. So a lot of what I learned was through communicating and shadowing the other healthcare practitioners that are involved in sport in the multidisciplinary clinic I was at, right? So the athletic therapist, who used to work with the Leafs, or the chiropractor who works with the Marlies. So I would spend a lot of time learning from them. So more like a mentorship as opposed to continuing education courses at that time. Mind you, I've done my fair share of courses. And when it comes to that, I would suggest do what you're passionate about, right? Go do a course that you really enjoy doing, because then you'll use it, right? If you're forced to take a course, or if you don't want to really do it because you're just trying to, get your credits, then are you really going to utilize it? You just want to increase the number of tools in your toolbox so that you have more to offer. But for myself, it was a lot of observation, mentoring, or being mentored, as well as and shadowing. Yes, that's probably initially how I started. And then 25 years of practice, at some point, then you start giving back too, right? And that's important as well.
Listen, your journey?
Yeah, similar thing. I think, like I alluded to in the beginning with my journey, like I just really have been fortunate to work with a lot of great clinicians and clinic owners who each spot that I've landed in all had really good, they really felt mentorship and doing like in-services and stuff with your clinical team was very important. So I've been pretty lucky. I'd say so shadowing and doing sort of clinical in-services has been really big, but the same thing, doing continuing ed stuff. So my first, as I said, I sort of felt a little urgency because it was a second career. So I think within my first 2 years of practice, I don't even know, but I took like a new continuing ed course, I feel like every other month, because I was like, more, feed me. I just need to like be the best now. And I think that's every new grad's like fear, is just like, I don't know anything so I definitely say to newer grads, like, you don't have to do that. Like, you can slow down, let your skill set sort of mature at a good pace. But taking courses to learn like, soft tissue release, different stretching courses. I've taken taping courses, all those things. But I do think it was really the mentorship at various clinics that I was at really helped. Like in the first few years, I worked in 2 very different clinical environments. So one was a downtown sports medicine clinic. We had a sports doctor, which was really cool. And it really felt multidisciplinary, where the physios and the chiros and the massage team, we really all tried to work together, sharing clients, like referring out if they're, specific to people's treatment plans and rehab plans. And then I worked for another clinic out in Scarborough that was where a lot of our client population were student athletes. And so that, I feel like, also just really helped me, because it was a lot of high school basketball, high school track and field. I mean, working with youth is very different than working with adults too, but it was very much an exercise rehab focused facility. And so they loved having massage sort of as that additional adjunct to the practice, but these kids were in training and working out as well as getting their therapy. And so that was like a huge growth for me, because the chiropractor that owned that clinic also just loved mentoring and teaching. And so I feel like I learned a lot through those years. And again, it was all sort of those connections that sort of led to a next step, and I mean, even taking, for the massage therapists out there, for the first probably 9, maybe even it was 10 years, maybe I let it lapse last year, I was part of the CSMTA, like the Canadian Sports Massage Therapy Association. And so even through that organization, being able to go to sports events, go to the different continuing ed and conferences that they held, I think that really helped me along the way. And that's where, again, just meeting other mentors then, and especially as an RMT, meeting other RMTs that were, 25 years, or at the time when I was 1 year, they were already 10 or 15 years deep. And I'm like, how did you get there? I think when I started, the big dream for me was to work at an Olympic level. And that didn't really, my career path went in different ways, but it was like I was meeting a lot of RMTs that, worked a lot of core medical and worked with like Athletics Canada and all these things. So it was just talking, asking questions. Like I did a lot of coffee dates, like that sort of thing. Yeah.
So now we're going to take a trip inside the arena with both of you. So many folks, I've had so many conversations about the curiosity around, what a day in the life is like, right? The road swings, the practices, in season, off season.
So while we're waiting for that, I'll just start with saying there is no Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. It's game day, practice day. You don't know what the day is, you don't know what the date is, you just know it's a practice day, a game day, or a travel day. That's it. The calendars no longer exist except that.
And I think an illusion, or not even an illusion, that's not the right way to say it, but I think for a lot of people who want, so you want to work in pro sports, massaging is only like a small part of actually what we do. We're all sort of, the whole medical team helps out wherever we can. So if the nutritionist needs help, sometimes we're helping her make shakes. Sometimes we're handing these shakes out. When we're traveling, we're helping carry all the equipment. When we arrive at the hotel, we're bagging, we're tagging. Like, it's anything to be of service to help the machine move. There's not an infinite amount of employees that make a team function. So, the massage aspect is obviously why we were hired, but there's so much more that becomes involved when you do work with a pro team, when you're traveling. So it's always just sometimes those little things that you don't see. Practice days, wiping up sweat off a court. These are things that were just of service to do. So if you look at this schedule, the red is home games, the black is away. So I think to point out is on, what is this, November 15, 16, red, black, back to back. So that's a home away travel day. That's an exciting time. You'll start, usually we'll have practice in the morning, you get a little break, then you gotta go to the arena for game time, we'll have some treatments, guys will get on the court, game plays, we finish the game, we rush to the airport, get on a plane, fly from home to Boston, to wake up, to do that all over again in the morning. And then after that, we fly home right away. So it's just like you're in and you're out in 24 hours.
And like even after the home game, we're still performing treatments post game because you're about to go into a back-to-back. So recovery is primary at that point, right? So maybe the game ends at 10, you get to the airport, you leave by 11:15 maybe, the flight time to Boston.
By the time you get back to
land,
we're setting up treatment rooms at 2 a.m. basically.
Exactly. Yeah. So it's a whole ordeal. And then after the Boston game, you come home, 8 p.m. game. So maybe you're back at home, landing maybe at 1 a.m., back in your house at 2, unwind, go to sleep by 3, but it's a practice day because we have a game on the 18th. So, yeah.
So it's a lot.
It's a grind.
I think, so I think people look at a basketball schedule and you see all the grade out days thinking, oh, you're probably home chilling and resting. But it's no, you're still working every single day, having a practice day. Those days will look different. It'll fluctuate. Sometimes you're not there, for 8 hours, but something happens every single day. And especially as the season goes on, the medical squad, it's all hands on deck all the time. And so the guys are obviously really feeling it. And so that's where all the therapists are kind of, round the clock when the athletes kind of need the help, need the work.
Yeah, it's where the athletes are, we are. So you'll miss Christmas, you'll miss birthdays, you'll miss whatever, but it's what you do, right? It's what you signed up for. So I remember, just like a personal note, my son was like, Mom, you gonna take me to school? I'm like, sorry, babe, my time's not mine anymore. Season's about to start. Like literally. It's like, okay, I'll take the bus. And okay, that's it. That's not, I'll see you end of April. Maybe longer if we continue, right? But yeah, that's how it works.
Yeah, literally last weekend was our last sort of free open weekend before our preseason schedule starts. And I had a friend say, okay, we try to have dinners semi-regular. She's like, okay, what's the next weekend you're free? And I'm like, spring 2025. Right.
If you unpack practice versus game day, how different does that look?
I mean, the length of the day. So usually, depending on what happens, you'll have sort of some pre-treatment maybe before practice, and then more recovery massage post-practice, with the practice time sandwiched in between. So it's just kind of scheduled. Thankfully, our head trainer makes a nice schedule for all of us to follow, and we just sort of show up and do what needs to be done.
And even during the practice time, we're there, we're on court, right? You gotta be observing any issues, any injuries. Like Melissa said, if there's a spill, like if a player falls or whatever, and the court's wet, we got to wipe it up because our job is prevention of injury, right? So you're doing, there's no job too little, too big. You're there, you're doing it all, right? So it's not like, oh, while they're practicing, we're chilling and recovering ourselves. You're there, you're very present. And then on the game day, that's also like that length of day is longer, right? Because you'll have shoot around in the morning, pre-treatments, post-treatments after shoot around. You'll have a little bit of time in between, and then usually we are at the arena 3-ish hours before game time for the pre-game treatments, and then game, and then post-game treatment. So that day is just, it's basically all day. Yeah. At least a good 16-hour day?
It's a long-ass day.
Yeah. Yes.
And then off season, in season?
I mean, we have summer league in July, and so that, again, it gets scheduled. I'm sure I've only done it the one time, but it'll, you're just sort of given the time frame of like, okay, this is the week we'd like you to show up, or these are the few days, and it's sort of, and it just runs the same way. Like you're just there to support the team. You're given that game schedule, and so you sort of know when your treatment windows will be, and that's sort of the main activity that happens in the summer is NBA Summer League. And then occasionally you'll have, I guess, players come in and out through the summer. So if anyone's coming into town, we're always just given a message like, we're there to provide support. So if there's a player in town, you know, our boss will just say, okay, so-and-so's in town. This is kind of what we need this week. Who's on call? And we sort of all rotate as far as who shows up to provide care.
Yeah, it's this summer you do get some downtime from the intensity, but you're still on call and there's still some responsibilities that you're, you have to uphold, but you definitely get to refill your tank in the summer. Yeah.
And Zahra, I learned from you, you got a home toiletry kit and the road toiletry kit. You don't mix those up.
You have to learn how to be strategic with your packing. So I have everything I need duplicated, right? So your stuff at home and your stuff on the road, it just stays in the suitcase, all your toiletries, because you don't have time to, did I get my lotion? Did I get my potion? Did I get, no, you have double, so you know you have it all. Because you're traveling so much, you want the luxuries of home when you're on the road. You want the comforts of those too, right? So you have to become efficient and an expert with packing. But I do overpack.
Except for the shoes.
Need options. You need options.
Exactly, options.
So y'all touched on it a little bit. Would love to dig a little bit more into, we've used different words, the grind, the sacrifice, just the mindset that you feel like you've built over time or you need to have to show up. But like, Zahra, you were saying at dinner, you've jumped on FaceTimes just to stay close to the family. And like, just how do you set your mind up around the moments you're going to miss and the sacrifice you have to make for this commitment?
Sacrifice, it goes both ways. It's yourself and your family, right? So I've been with the team now 8 years. I was part of the championship, so that was going to June, so you're away a lot more but it's an exciting time, so everybody's there to support you. Then COVID hit, and I had to go into the NBA bubble, and I was away from my family for like 2 months. And let alone the stress of COVID, right? And then we had Tampa. We couldn't continue to play in Toronto, so the team had to move to Tampa. And I was away from my family for 6 months. I have 2 boys, so imagine that sacrifice from you. And that's also during COVID, and you don't know what your kids are going through and your family's going through, and you're in Tampa, which was Corona-palooza, and there, there's a lot going on, and you have to stay isolated and care for yourself because you don't want to be responsible for bringing COVID into the team, right? So there's a lot that goes into being, depending on the situation and circumstances, that, when you're committing to this, there's a lot that goes into it. And if you have a good support system at home, that's how you get through it, right? So there is a lot of sacrifice. There's the first thing when I get a schedule, the first thing I check is my younger son birthday's in November. It's like, am I going to be home for his birthday and am I going to be home for Christmas? Those are the first thing. Everyone's checking about, okay, are we playing this team or that team, or how long are we going to be in this city? I'm like, am I missing Christmas and my son's birthday, right? So these are the things you consider, being a parent, but you navigate. Once you know what the situation is, then you navigate accordingly. Now, they are very supportive, and there's a lot of pros and benefits to what we do for sure. But you just have to be aware that it's not just 5-star hotels and fancy food, right? It's a real commitment, it's real work, and you have to show up to do your job at 100% because you're impacting the players and their health and well-being, right? So there's a lot more involved than just, oh, you work for the Raptors, right? Or you work in pro sports. You have to understand that part too.
Yeah, I think the idea of when you're in sort of any job outside of pro sports of like, oh, I kind of don't feel well today, or I'm a little tired, I'm a little stressed, I'll just take the day off. Like, that just doesn't really occur. Like, unless you are sick, you take time off because you also don't want to have that impact the team and your other colleagues. But like, you show up day in, day out. You do what you can to make sure you stay healthy, first of all. But yeah, I do think a year in, so prior to this, I'd worked 5 seasons with the Blue Jays on a part-time basis. So I didn't travel with the team. So I didn't have, I would hear about the demands and I would see it by the end of season. You could see it in the therapist's faces of how draining, especially if you're not winning, all of those things also impact your moods and mindsets and all of that stuff. And so they had always said, you've got the best of both worlds, part-time plus your own clinic, you get your own life, you get to sleep in your own bed. And, when you're on that side, you're like, but I want to know what it's like to be full-time. And now I know. And it is like, you really, like when the off season came, everyone's like, oh my God, amazing. Are you going to go on vacation? What are you going to go do? Are you going to go travel? I'm like, I am going to be in my bed enjoying my rent. Like, I did not want to see an airplane. I did not want to see another hotel, because you just miss those little things. You miss times with your people, the hugs, the dinners, time with your family. So it is, it is a sacrifice that I think, while the job is amazing and can appear super glamorous, like there's always that sacrifice and that impact of like, how do you create the balance and how do you create the self-care, and make sure that, as Zahra said, that in the off seasons and when you get those pockets of time that you fill your cup up so that you can show up. But I also think having a quality team around you makes a huge difference, because if you're surrounded by people you don't like or you don't enjoy working with, that's going to make that time feel 10 times worse. So, I think I've been lucky with the time that I had with the Blue Jays, that I had a really supportive team. The fact that how I even got hired into that, they'd never had a part-time sort of employee, and they were just looking for an extra set of hands. But it was really from a physiotherapist who was a woman who ended up getting promoted to head trainer, created that opportunity after meeting me at a networking event and me being like, how do I get in? She became in a position of power and created an opportunity. And then once I was there, she ended up 2 seasons later leaving, but like building the relationships with the rest of the medical squad that was there, like having, good people to learn from and to work with is why you keep coming back and why you stick with it. And the same thing a year in, I think we just have such a quality staff that, that I get to learn from and show up and work with every day, that makes it, like super easy to be like, yeah, I'm in this, Yeah,
I guess the other end of the pressure is delivering on the care, right? So, we had this conversation at dinner for a little bit, and Melissa, you were asked this question on a podcast, and it was a fascinating conversation. We got to drop that. Fascinating conversation, but the host asked you about the pace and the pressure and the mindset that you have around being in that arena. There's obviously like quick return to play timelines and, performance and injury mitigation. Like, what are your mindsets around just that end of it, just the pressure and delivering on care, even if you consider it pressure or not?
So I think when I first started working in the MLB, like with the Blue Jays, you just naturally do. You're like, these are $1 million bodies. So you naturally are like, holy shit. Sorry, swearing. Your pits are sweating and you're like, don't screw this up, don't screw this up. But then, you spend a day with these guys and everyone's so chill and you're just like, you show up like you show up to your clinic. You just come, you do the work that that you're meant to do. You treat them like you treat your clients and all of that. And it just sort of works itself out. So I think I learned pretty easily that there's, I can't control like that kind of pressure. So like, it's not something I'm going to internalize. And thankfully, like in our roles, like even how everything is functioning with our team, all that pressure is on our head trainer. He has to answer to the front office and he has to help make those treatment plans and the physios and, and we're slotted into that care. So really, thankfully, we can, help support them if they're feeling pressure. But yeah, injuries happen. There's always going to be a specific timeline. If you can get an athlete healthier after some kind of injury, that's like a bonus. But like even in clinic, we sort of have these protocols and guidelines for a reason, because you're not going to tell someone who's hurt their knee, playing slow pitch, like, oh, you'll feel better in a week. It's like, no, this is going to take this amount of time. This is how that rehab, that plan's going to work. The more diligent you are at executing the plan, hopefully that gives you positive returns and you'll see. But it's also like, how do people normally heal? What's their like nutrition, their sleep? Like there's so many, it's a holistic care. And so that's the nice thing about when you do work in pro sports is you do see how those things can be how, with all that support, you can see how that healing process can happen like in such an amazing way versus what we would see in sort of a clinical setting where, you know, no one's having like their meals prepared for them and making sure they're taking all their vitamins and doing their rehab every single day and getting manual treatment every single day. So you definitely see how that is an incredible aspect to what we do, because these guys can bounce back, you know, probably better than the average person. But yeah, I personally feel like we don't really internalize that kind of pressure.
No, it's, and to be real, we're massage therapists. If we're stressed, that's going to transfer onto our patients, right? So we can't adapt that mindset. We have to stay calm. We have to stay positive. We have to listen, be empathetic, you know, and that's where we shine with our skill set and how we support that rehab process. But they do have access and availability to all kinds of care to really support and optimize, maximize that healing ability outside of their genetic makeup, right? So it does, textbook will still identify return to play times, okay, a fracture 6 to 8 weeks, right? And, you know, and then based on everything else, we collectively try and make sure that the healing process is as seamless as possible.
So I'd love to dive into just how y'all are changing the landscape and just, you know, the intersection of being women and people of color. I just think it's a really important conversation to just dive into just your perspective on whether it's opportunities or challenges, just from the lens that you see the world through and your experiences within pro sports and how you're seeing that landscape change, if you don't mind taking up some space and taking us there.
I always find this sometimes hard. It's a hard thing to answer because I've had such different experiences in different avenues. But I'd say for the most part, when I'm in more of the either high level amateur or even into the pro sports, I'll say my experience prior to joining the Raptors, I would say I was either one of few women, or if I was like when I worked with the Canadian national team, I was definitely the only biracial, like brown woman. Everyone else was white, and yeah, pretty much. And so even in baseball, the medical squad was very diverse, and that was great. But you know, but I was like, once that head trainer had left her position, I was the only woman working on that team. So it was fine. I never saw it as like there was positives or negatives. That's just the landscape of the MLB. You're barely gonna see any women working it's slowly starting to change, but even from coaching to front office to medical, like it just is relatively non-existent. So I always take those positions with a bit of pride and being like, okay, I'm helping to showcase that it's not a big deal and I'm just here to do a good job and do my job well, and hope that it then opens up eyes that when they're ready to have more hiring processes or, you know, looking to, you know, hire interns, that sort of thing, that it then becomes a little more reflective with some better gender diversity. But yeah, I mean, even working in curling, how many Black people do you think curl? Like, it's changing at the grassroots level, but it's still, you know, a specific landscape. And so I always, but I think that's just been the nature of how my life has been too. So it's never been like a big deal to populate these spaces, you know? I just show up as myself and try to just be a good person and do a good job, and then hope that's trickles down in some other positive effect, you know? But I will say the best part of being like hired into the Raptors org is just you can see the intentionality from front office and hiring and HR and all of that, of like how diverse. The fact that our medical team, like 60-40 women to men, is pretty awesome. I work with so many amazing women across the board, from the front office to the PR department to the culture team, and so we interact every single day, and it's been great, because I'll tell you, communicating, I've made this comparison with some friends where, when you work with only men, you're just getting very different communication than when you're working with both men and women. And I just think the more even men are surrounded by women and communicate, like, their communication skills are just going to be different. And so I think that's been sort of the best sort of side benefit of working with this organization, is just how both culturally diverse it is and like how gender diverse it is.
Yeah, when I started with the team, it was just myself and another female physiotherapist in the locker room, right? So if you think about pro sports, male dominated, and women were not necessarily even thought of being in the locker room, and here you are, part of that role. And since then, we have evolved from originally maybe like 5 or 6 of us. The organization is a great organization, being intentional about being inclusive and raising women in their roles, right? So by now, I think we have over 20 women in the organization, and our medical staff in particular has changed over the years I've been there, for sure. 60-40 now, when it was just 80-20. So that has been great. For me, in terms of representation, of being a woman in this male-dominated space, I feel overall and then also a woman of color, right? I feel if you see us here, it means we belong here, right? And if we belong here, that means in and of itself, you're breaking barriers, right? And what we're doing is creating tangible hope for others to aspire and achieve their goals, right? It can happen. If this 5 foot, 100-something pound little brown mom can be in the NBA, so can you, right? It can happen. And for me, that's what representation means. And that's the importance of it. And then also, I would say, even taking it to another level. So one, you're a woman of color, you're providing this care, you're showing up as your authentic self because you know what you can bring to the table. What am I doing with this platform to do better and be better, right? And that's, I would say, one thing that I've done is start a nonprofit organization called Open Dialogue Canada. And that has really transpired what we realize we can do in these spaces, right? We can bring it up to the next level and not just impact ourselves and the direct people we work with, but use the platform to elevate the world in the healthcare space as a whole.
Amazing, appreciate you sharing, Zahra. Yeah, I put it up here so everybody can learn more about Open Dialogue, learn how you can get involved. Is anything else you want to share with Open Dialogue, the foundation, the vision, where it came from?
So Open Dialogue Canada is a nonprofit organization that I established with 2 other healthcare providers. In 2020, during the COVID pandemic, the world was basically compelled to acknowledge and witness the social and racial injustices that were occurring during that time with the tragic deaths of Breonna Taylor and George Floyd. I was in the NBA bubble in Orlando with the assumption of play, and we were about to play Milwaukee, and we heard the news of Jacob Blake being shot. And it was a very intense emotional moment for the players during that time. So myself and a couple of the healthcare providers, we decided to come together and have open dialogue on our experiences during that time, and also how, as healthcare providers, we can elevate our standards to provide better care because we have that direct impact on the health and well-being of the people we serve. So we started Open Dialogue Canada, which is a platform for healthcare providers to provide high quality, equitable care to BIPOC communities. The vision is basically to see Black, Indigenous, people of color to have experiences free of racial discrimination and bias within the healthcare system to offer and optimize their health and well-being. We want to bring awareness to things like the fact that BIPOC women are 3 times more likely to be diagnosed with breast cancer, which means they are also less likely to be referred for genetic testing. Between diagnosis and treatment has been delayed. The idea or the fact that Black men are 80% more likely to be diagnosed with prostate cancer. The fact that people of color are 2 to 3.5 times more likely to be diagnosed with type 2 diabetes. The systematic lack of diversity in the textbooks that teach us. Think about your anatomy textbooks. How often do you see a colored skin depicting a picture? Can you think and take the time to be aware that, well, will a rash present the similarly in a white skin compared to a darker skin? Does that create implications of how the person's being diagnosed, right? So we want to bring awareness to those things, and we came together to form this platform to really become architects of a new narrative where the uniqueness and dignity of every human being is valued, and that we can have an impact on, with the cultural humility that we offer, have an impact on their care.
Thank you, Zahra. Appreciate you sharing. Really appreciate your passion for the project and what you're building and the change that we can make in the conversation. So, Zahra, I'll be around after, ask you some more questions and learn more about how we could all get involved.
Yeah, it's you're welcome to check out the website or follow us on Instagram. It's a passion project. It's our heart's work. So, if you want to send us an email, we're always looking for people to support the cause. If you're interested in finding out more, please just send us an email. Yeah.
Thank you, Zahra. Appreciate it. So before we wrap, I know we're running out of time here, I want to leave some time for y'all to mingle and talk and get to know each other a little bit better. A lot of you sent in questions. The main reason for even asking the questions is to make sure that the questions that I asked these two had a lot to do with your questions and what you were curious about. But I printed up a couple more that are a little bit outside of the conversation that we had today that came from a lot of the folks in the audience here. So one was, what's one thing you didn't expect from this experience in pro sports, but you're happy that it happened?
The friends you make along the way.
Right.
I don't know. I think, I do think that's part of it. Like I said, being able to work with people you enjoy spending your time with, you always hope that happens, but when it actually does authentically, that's always a bonus, because you spend way more time with your colleagues now than you do with your family. So the fact that we can be on road trips and still spend all day together, but then still go out to dinner together and hang out is actually great. Because to be honest, I had a few of my Blue Jays colleagues kind of tell me and now I feel so sad for them. They're just the road life, it's very lonely. It can just, because you just don't want to see those people after you've spent, all that time together. And it was a little bit of a worry, but so far so good. And I think for me, another one, for those who do know me, that I'm really big into running and the run community. And so honestly, the biggest side bonus of our travel schedule is that I get to see some of my running friends that live in different cities in the States and get to either have lunch or a quick coffee, depending on our schedule, or go for a run with them. And so that's actually been pretty amazing.
Amazing.
Yeah, Melissa knows someone in every city. Memphis, she knows somebody.
Not surprised.
For me, actually, the surprise was more of being when you're on the road and you're traveling and you get that downtime. So at home, I'm a wife, I'm a mother, I'm a career woman, I'm a daughter of aging parents. There's so many responsibilities at home that I don't put myself on the list when I'm at home. That time between shoot around and game, that 3 hours, I go home, I cook dinner, I pick up my kids from school, and I come right back to kiss them and then go back to work, right? So you're juggling. And so being on the road, which was a pleasant surprise, is wait a minute, I can have salad for dinner and not feed these monstrous boys who just want meat. Or I'm like, I'm gonna put on a face mask and watch Netflix tonight after my treatments. See you in the morning. You know, like gaining back that time for myself was a pleasant surprise. As much as you're like away, it's part of the things I do to fill my tank during the season so I can continue to give. Yeah, so I would say some alone time was very much appreciated on the road, yeah.
You got into one of the questions here, which is how y'all self-care.
Yeah.
So I feel like I've been a self-care girly before it was popular. But honestly, like, I do love making sure that I get massages throughout the year whenever I can sneak it in. I've always been like a sauna, cold plunge person, but just like daily stuff, I foam roll. Foam roll. Like, my body has always been like stiff, tight, sore sort of thing. So just, I find having that as just my everyday routine of just 5 to 10 minutes, foam roll everything out, get myself going for the day. I try to stay as physically active as possible. Like this job, again, lugging massage tables nonstop, like on and off a truck, on and off a bus, to practice, from practice, to hotels, from hotels. You know, you got to have some strength, right? So I try to just have some semblance of physical activity routine. I sleep a lot. I nap on the bus. I sleep on the plane. I get solid sleep at night. Like, that's always kind of my like A1 go-to self-care, is just like, your girl is tired, so it's time to sleep.
Sorry.
Yeah, and then just friends and family. I think that's the big thing that I noticed this year is or last season rather, is connection. So even if you're tired and don't have a lot of time, if I can sneak in a quick meet up with a friend to get like a good solid hug, like, I'm a hugger. I'm a hug it out. I want all the hugs. So that actually has been like a big thing for me in the last season, of just like, that helps with my personal self-care.
Zahra, you got salad, you got face mask. What else you got going on?
So no, I mean, sleep is really important, and you know, you grab it anywhere you can, on the bus, on the plane, you know, whenever you can, you grab the sleep. But for me, I'm old, guys. I have to adapt a mindset. That's what really gets me through. Is like, I am tall and youthful by association. That's what gets me through. That's it. I'm like, it's not happening. I'm not breaking down. It's just, I'm going. This is my passion. This is my purpose. The universe is gonna provide. That's it. That's it. And when and if I need a massage, I'll get one. But really, it's more the sleep and then the mindset of, I got this. That's for me. Yeah.
Amazing. We'll make time for 2 more here, and then we'll wrap it up. So one of the questions was, what are themes that you see in folks on the medical staff of all backgrounds that you see are makes them successful?
I mean, I think the idea of just being, like, really being of service and doing what needs to be done to sort of get the job done. Like, no, you can't have an ego of like, oh, I only do this type of thing, or I only want to do this type of thing. Like, that's not gonna cut it. I just think having a passion for just doing whatever needs to be done. I think that's the biggest thing. I think is just, yeah, anyone I see who's been successful is because they're really passionate about what they do. They really want to be a part of something bigger than them. You know, we all want to be a part of this team to help it succeed, and to see each of these players, because we relationship build, right? So you get to know these guys. Some guys are with you for multiple seasons, some guys just a portion of the season, but as you get to know all of them, you're rooting for them, you're rooting for their success. So you're doing what you can to be a part of that puzzle, to help elevate them and elevate your fellow colleagues too. So I think when people are thinking about if this is something they'd like to pursue, I do think that's part of it, is just, you know, being really good at what you do and being passionate, but really knowing that it's like even a little bit more than that, you know? like really giving of yourself, and like I said, sometimes doing whatever needs to be done, and however unglamorous that might be.
Yeah, like I'm sure every one of you guys are great at what you do, right? You're working, you get your feedback from your clients. The skill set is there. It's how do you work in an environment? Do you believe in the team before you believe in yourself, right? Is no job too little, too big, right? It's really basically echoing what Melissa said. It's how you perform in the team as part of the team that determines your success. Yeah.
And the last question would be, y'all were already kind of getting into it, but just, there's a lot of folks in the crowd who would love to get to where y'all are at today, and if you have any advice to leave them with before we wrap. I know you love this question, Melissa.
No. I think I do just want to press upon, because I do get this often when I talk to up and coming RMTs and other therapists that want to get in. I just say that no path is the same. How Zahra found her way to this job, how I found, for me getting hired with the Raptors, like the Raptors posted it on LinkedIn, on the Rogers communicate, like I just sent in my email, my resume, like a regular job, and then that just, thankfully I got a call back, and and you start having the going through that interview process. But for me in this case, it was literally like they posted it into the world and had hundreds and maybe more responses, and I found my way to getting hired. But previous to that, there's no, I don't know, it's just sort of like, be clear about what your goals are, like have an idea. And sometimes that path, like I said in the beginning, I thought, I want to work in the Olympics. I want to go to some Olympic Games, work with Team Canada. That is the goal. And that I've never done that. But it was just sort of talking to my clinical clients of like, hey, I want to work in sports. This is sort of my side project. Oh, I'm going to this exciting weekend. I'm going to go massage the Ride to Conquer Cancer or this run. And the more you start sort of talking about it, these things manifest, because honestly, every opportunity has then come. How I got into working with curling, literally a client on my table who worked for Sportsnet at the time was working on the TV side, the business side of putting on these curling events. She's like, hey, I think this event is looking for a therapist. It's probably not going to pay a lot, but like if you're interested, they'd love a couple hours. And I was like, sure, let me talk to the person who's organizing it. Boom, I worked with the Grand Slam of curling for 7 years. Every time they came to Toronto, they hired me up, and each year I got a little bump in that honorarium. But it was a joy, because through that, I got to meet Olympic gold medalists, like world champions, the nicest people. I got to learn about the body in such a different way. Volunteer your time. I know we all have bills to pay, and it can be really hard to give extra when you have a busy clinical practice. But I promise you, like for me, that was a huge aspect of just getting experience, networking, talking about what you're doing. I volunteered time at running rooms, doing like learn to stretch and why mobility is good for you, like doing all those kinds of talks. Being a runner in the community. When I first graduated, thankfully I was running with a run crew in Parkdale, and I was sort of like, hey, can I talk to the runners after the run tonight about like what I do? And like all those little things matter. And you never know where you get opportunities, The clinic I had started working at that worked with youth athletes in Scarborough, I had left that job to stay at a downtown clinic. A couple years had gone by. I'd sort of stayed in touch. I got a call out of the blue because that clinic owner was connected to someone who actually worked in the Raptors org, who at the time, a player on the team was looking for an RMT on the side. He thought of me, keeping good relationships. Even when you leave a place of work, don't burn your bridges, unless it's super toxic. But like try to keep good relationships with good people, even if you leave a space, because they'll remember you. And then if a job opportunity that comes onto their desk comes that they can't handle, they may reach out. And so that developed a relationship and got me working with a pro athlete on the side that I ended up years later being able to use on my resume that I'm sure helped when they were looking at all the things like, oh, she worked with this person who was on our team that they know, they ask me about it. So all those little things. And sometimes there's courses, like I've met wonderful people taking different courses both in Canada and in the States that you stay in touch with, that you get to, just, I don't know. Like I said, it's always hard because there's bills to pay, but I always every year kind of fractioned off a bit of my time to like either volunteer or work at a lower rate. Like I made it work however you can, because that's ultimately where a lot of my bigger opportunities came from, was when I was giving my time to, and then I met someone or got connected and then other doors opened.
Right.
So
show up, be of service. Yeah, giving some themes. So
I mean, all of that, ditto, right? Like it's and then I would add, be authentic. Are you, especially in this atmosphere of pro sports, the athletes are very tuned in and skeptical on who they're letting into their lives. They're high demand individuals. And are you there for them or are you there for yourself? They can weed that out, right? So be authentic in what you're providing, in the service that you're giving, because that will show in the work. And then that's how the word of mouth comes, and that's how everything else kind of evolves outside of everything else she said.
Yeah, and I think one more thing is just learning about, authentic, like relationship building too. It starts in your clinic, how you're talking to your patients, how you're learning about them, the things you'll remember about your conversations that you bring up the next time. I mean, that's just normal stuff about client retention, but that is so important. The soft skills, so important to build up your reputation, but just to understand that relationship building. Because as you said, even working, you could get hired, but if you don't have good, personable skills and that stuff, working with people, like they'll feel it and they'll know it, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh, nah, I don't want to work with that person, and that's never a good thing.
Well, we appreciate y'all. Y'all are two very, very busy people. So we thank you so much for carving out your time to share your stories with us. Really appreciate it.
Thanks
you again.
Everybody too for coming out.
Thank you for coming.
Zahra and Melissa, y'all hanging around? Y'all hanging around for a little bit? Okay,
Yes.
Don't mob them right away with your questions. But Althea, thank you so much for hosting us in your space again. Everybody at Myo Detox, appreciate y'all pulling up, making this happen. More behind the curtains to come.
Thank you.
Thank y'all. Appreciate your time.